Hello, and welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Megan, and my amazing co-host is
I am Amanda.
hello. We are your homeschool haven for messy, imperfect, real life discussion about homeschooling. We never show up here pretending our lives are so perfect, and you end up walking away feeling like crap about yourself. That is not how we roll.
No, it definitely is not. So, another thing that really sets us apart from the homeschool community, a lot of homeschool communities anyway, is our progressive stance. Here, we believe that love is love, science is real. Yeah, that means the earth is round. Women's rights and trans rights are non negotiable. And come on now, that was not a freaking Roman salute.
Roman salute my ass. So you can relax here. We will not lull you into a false sense of security and then start spouting cult rhetoric midway through the episode. What will we be talking about today, though? We're going to be talking about deschooling. And this is a topic that we feel like we cannot really spend enough time discussing for a couple of reasons. So we're going to dig into that. But first, we kick off all of our episodes with some real life updates and just kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of our homeschooling lives. So what's with you, man?
Yeah, well, first, before I jump into that, we do want to say a quick thank you to today's sponsor, Miss Devon's Video Game Universe, for generously supporting today's episode. We're excited to tell you more about all of their amazing programs a little later in the episode. But yeah, so our recap, so you know you're not alone, and we are in fact real people who do not live Instagram perfect lives. This week has been a real struggle here in my world, like just real struggle bus. And there's nothing like specific, you know how sometimes you just have those weeks that are like, give me a freaking break. I did okay on Monday. I was not feeling great, but I was able to like be patient and calm and the kind of mom that I want to be. That totally fell apart on Tuesday. Tuesday was one of those days that like Tuesday morning, I was like really struggling, but doing that good job of like taking a step back, taking a couple deep breaths, and then asking kindly for what I wanted. And then, like, after the third time, it involved me kicking empty water bottles down the stairs and me yelling like a screaming banshee about how I really just needed him to fucking listen to what I needed him to do. And if he didn't listen, heads were going to roll. It was ugly. And, of course, then, like, once we all calmed down and he stopped crying because I was that asshole, I apologized, and he was like, "No, I understand because I really should have listened the first few times. Like, I really pushed it." That's true, but I still should have handled it better. I'm the parent. It's my job to handle it better and model that better. So yeah, I mean, we survived Tuesday, but Tuesday was just hard. And then I had these crazy overnight board meetings because I'm still managing my US responsibilities even while we're in Europe. And so I was up all night, basically in the middle of the night doing board meetings. And so then, like I just didn't want to do schooling stuff the next day. And then it really hit me with my chronic fatigue yesterday and the day after. And I didn't even get out of bed. Like it was just brutal. So yeah, I felt like I had the energy to actually get out of bed and type some notes up for today's podcast. That's pretty much all that's going to happen. I did make food. I made him a meal before I came in here to start podcasting. That's more than I'd done most of this week. So, yeah, hopefully we're heading in the right direction.
Exactly. I'm sorry you've had a rough week. We all have those weeks. And so if you're listening and you're thinking you're that perfect parent and you're going to comment about Amanda's week, don't, because we all have those weeks, right? Where it's not ideal, but we get through it,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, that's it. It'll go up from here. It'll be fine. And always a good learning opportunity, right? Even the bad weeks. Actually, sometimes the bad weeks are an even better learning opportunity of owning your responsibility and, yeah.
that is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So how about you guys? You're pretty busy. You're in a new location.
Of course, so busy this week. It's been a pretty good week. Yeah. So the last couple of episodes I shared, we were pet sitting. We were just outside London. We have another pet sit starting next week, but we had an almost 2 week gap in between the two. So we're spending those 2 weeks in London. So we're at a hostel right in central London. I love hostel living. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm currently in one of the top bunks in our room because the lighting is better than in my bunk, which is on the bottom. So yeah, but we've had a good week. It's just been busy. All right. And it's that thing like, we're world schooling, we're adventuring. we're so lucky to have these opportunities. We're like a one thing a day kind of family. And so when we're in the city, there's so much to see and do that's, you want to capitalize on the time that you have while you're in the city. And so we've been doing more in a typical day than we have been. And so then I feel like a little bit guilty because then I feel like more work falls on Amanda. I'm not like I'm like, I swear I will be online later and I will help with some of the responsibilities of the things that I helped create. So, but I know it's short term. Tuesday we're going to be outside of the city again for a 3-week pet sit, and then I'll be hunkered at home and I'll be able to catch up on life. And it's not just Amanda that I'm being on. I've got like 20 things for 20 people, but it's good. We went to Brick Lane the other day, and my daughter found her prom dress, which was super exciting. There's these pop-up hubs that happen that are about a week long. And then some people tack on like a week before and a week after. So there's a prom that's happening in Budapest in May, and we're doing that. And she's so excited for it. So we went vintage shopping, and so we tried everything on, and a whole bunch of stuff. And she just like didn't quite know what she wanted. And then she found this pair of boots that were these stunning, like super character vintage boots, like amazing. And once she found those, it was like, well, these are now the outfit, right? Like now I just need like a basic dress. So the dress went from needing to have like all this character to just kind of complementing the boots, which made life easier. So she found this amazing dress that went with it, that fit her like it was made for her. And she picked up a couple of other things like fun cardigans and like this really gorgeous vintage jacket and stuff. So we had fun there. And then today we were out. She needed some new jeans. And so today we went out shopping for jeans, which is just as awful as it is for us, right? Like there's no jeans are just a punishment, right? So thankfully, though, she struck gold at the second store. It was a little bit more money than I wanted to spend, but because she found jeans that fit, I was like, I don't even care. Like, if we could just call this a day and be done with shopping for jeans, I'm good. Let's just go. So she managed, but she really did need some new jeans. So I was like, okay. So yeah, we went to see Operation Mincemeat last night, which sounds like the oddest name for a play ever, but it's based on a true story about an operation during World War II based in England. And it was amazing. There's a movie about it on Netflix if you can't get to the theater. Also really good. It has Colin Firth in it. And it's in the US playing on Broadway for like 20 weeks. So I'm hoping at some point they'll have traveling companies that'll go out and more people will have access to get to go see it. But it was incredible. So yeah, so it's been busy, but I mean, all good things, but just busy. So I promised Amanda that when we're done podcasting today, I will not leave the hostel anymore today, and I will sit and get some things done. Yeah. So, but otherwise, it's been great. We love London, if not for how expensive it is, and freaking Brexit made it difficult for us to get paperwork to live here. We would live here in a heartbeat, but it is so expensive. I have neurodivergent kids, and one of my kids is autistic, and food is a really big thing as far as food textures and smells, and it has to be exactly a certain way and all that kind of. He only eats like 5 things and whatever. And so they have a self-catering hall here at the hostel, which is just like a kitchen area. And it's beautifully stocked. There's pots and pans and knives and cutting boards, and everybody cleans up after themselves. And you can have like a little designated space in the refrigerator and stuff for your food. And so the first thing I did when we got here was I went out and I bought like a little George Foreman grill. It was like 30 pounds, but which is like $35. But I was like, okay, $35, but if I can grill him chicken twice a day, every day, as opposed to having to go get something, budget friendly win, because it's so expensive to try to eat out, especially when you have teenagers and they eat so freaking much. I mean, my 17-year-old, where we go to Nando's, which is our favorite chicken place here, he gets a sharing platter, but he doesn't share, right? Like I can't do that every day. My husband would be like on the floor breathing into a brown paper bag if I spent that kind of money every day. So yeah, self-catering hall it is for us. And you meet cool people in the self-catering hall. So I like it.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive in. We're talking deschooling today. First of all, I think it's probably a good idea to start with just some basic definitions because we have a few terms that are often confused or used interchangeably, even when they really shouldn't be. And look, we get it. That's totally understandable, especially when you're new and these words all sound quite similar. So yeah, it's definitely hard to keep them straight. We're going to dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the first one, kind of what we're all about, homeschooling. Okay. So homeschooling is a large umbrella term that covers a really wide range of approaches and methodology But everyone under this umbrella is choosing components of their child's education and at some level kind of determining what that path looks like, what that journey looks like. So that will almost certainly look different ways, right? If you take 10 homeschoolers and you ask them what they're doing, all 10 of them will probably tell you something completely different. So that's a really big umbrella term. Now, I will throw out one distinction to save some of the new people. In some, possibly many states, using the public school at home option doesn't legally count as homeschooling. Okay. So, like in North Carolina, there's a virtual school option through the public school. Legally, that is not a homeschool. So, while we aren't particularly proud of the way sometimes this gets handled in communities, if you pop into a Facebook group and be like, we're new to homeschooling and I'm using the public school option at home, and you name what that thing is, there's a really good chance you're going to get pounced on and told that you're not a real homeschooler, quote unquote. So, just be aware of the legal distinction between the two because some people get really pissy about that. So, we're just trying to say, enter gracefully if that's your chosen route.
Yeah, no, for sure. The internet can be a judgy place. And there are differences, right? Like there's virtual school, there's the homeschool charter program in California. There are all sorts of different ways to do it. And yeah, the internet, like I said, it's just a judgy place. And that unfortunately applies to a lot of homeschool groups as well. So my thing is like, please don't let them get you down, right? Like you can get information that you need wherever. And also it might be hard, but you can almost always find your people. Just find your people where they'll be kind about the questions you're asking and be helpful. Okay, but so our second word or kind of topic we want to bring up is unschooling. Okay, so unschooling and deschooling get mixed up all the time, all the time. They are very much not the same thing. Okay, like these are not the same thing. So let's talk about unschooling. Unschooling is a philosophy of education that focuses on child-led learning and interest-based learning. If you're looking at homeschooling on a spectrum, Megan and I are a great visual for what that range can look like, right? I am all the way towards the other end, looking at state standards and using curriculum for most, if not sometimes all, of our formal learning activities, right? And then at the other end, you have Megan, who is following her kids' interests and using those interests to learn core skills and grow and learn all of these amazing things, but really only bringing in curriculum and formal classes when it aligns specifically with what her children want and need for their goals, right? There's very much not Megan driving the bus over in their house. The thing is, both of these fall under the school of homeschooling as a type of homeschooling. And there are loads of other options and styles in there. It's just that Megan's version is what's called unschooling.
Exactly. And it's all under that one umbrella. So now, finally, we have arrived at our focus for the day, which is number 3, deschooling. So I like to think of the prefix D in deschooling, DE, like detoxing. Okay. I like to think of it as like this is a time period where you can purge often potentially traumatic public school experiences, which happens for many people. We see how many people are like, my kids being bullied, their mental health is suffering. In those cases, you need deschooling more than anybody, right? This is a time to begin thinking of education in new and different ways. I will add here spontaneously that the other people who I think need a lot of deschooling are people with really traditional education backgrounds, right? I mean, how many times do we see people come into groups and are like, well, I have a master's in this and that's amazing. That's so amazing. But it is not a one-to-one correlation to homeschooling. And in some cases, I think it's actually harder because you've had so much more traditional learning methodology ingrained into your brain that the detoxification process is just that much more. Deschooling is just a chance to take a breath for a hot minute, right? I mean, this is a really big life shift if you're coming into homeschooling. Take a breath. It's all good. But Amanda has this really cool analogy. What you got?
Yeah. So I like to talk about deschooling as essentially a bad relationship, right? We all know, whether we practice it in reality or not, we all know that if you have just gotten out of a bad relationship, especially if it was toxic or there was some other kind of not good thing happening in it, that you really need to take time between that relationship and your next relationship to, you know, process the baggage and get over the relationship and make sure that you're in a really good place before you get into your next relationship. And if you don't do that, if you go straight from a bad relationship into what's a really good relationship, it's going to make your really good relationship a lot harder. You're going to take all that baggage with you. You're going to bring all that crap. The good relationship may or may not survive it, but even if it survives it, you have a much harder time in the beginning than you would have if you'd just taken a step back and taken a bit of time to like process and get ready for the new relationship. And deschooling is the exact same idea. Like you were leaving the relationship with public school, probably because it wasn't good and there was something that just wasn't working. And you need to take the time to unpack that, process it, so that you actually really have a good experience homeschooling. We see so many people who dive straight into homeschooling with like the full on educational. I got all of this curriculum and I told them we're going to do it and we're going to sit down and we're going to do it. And it's not working and we're fighting all the time. And homeschooling just isn't working for us. And we're like, oh, well, how long have we been doing it? And it's like 1 month or 2 months with Christmas break in there. Like, no, 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 no. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that.
I know there was a post I saw not that long ago, and it was 2 months. And the parent was like, the kid has no drive to learn and this, that, and the other thing. And part of deschooling is how long that break is, which we'll talk about. But, this was a kid who was like 13, 14, maybe, I forget. They've been in the public school system for a really long time. There's a lot to undo there, right? You cannot expect this kid to just turn on a dime in 2 months' time and have this all figured out and all that. Like, it's so unfair for us to have that expectation of these kids. So I love your analogy, Amanda. So real quick, to circle back to our umbrella note, would you say that all schooling types, right? Whether you plan to go fully online, whether you plan to buy an all-in-one curriculum, if you're going to do unit studies, if you're going to be eclectic and kind of pull stuff from everywhere, do all of those deschool, right? So it's basically are all the philosophies that fall under that umbrella of homeschooling deschool worthy, would you say?
I think the only exception to that would be if you are going into a public school virtual program, not like one of this separate homeschool backed paid versions, but a lot of schools, I don't know with the new administration if there's still going to be funding there for it, but there are a lot of schools that currently offer fully virtual public school options. And I think you can't really take the time to deschool in that situation because you're still in a traditional public school and there's not time for the break, right?
You
There's
come to truant.
yeah, I mean you have to attend the classes, and you've got all the homework and the deadlines and all of that kind of stuff. And that's just part of that public school thing. But I think that outside of that, yeah, all of them need deschooling. Even if your kiddo was never in school and you're going to start homeschooling straight away, you probably need to do a fair amount of deschooling before you start the homeschool process, just to make sure that you, as the parent, are not trying to replicate traditional public school at home. I don't know how many times you see parents who have kindergartners and they're like, well, they won't sit still. And, like I can't get them to do the 5 or 6 hours of schoolwork a day that we need to do. And it's like, oh, a kindergartner does not need that. Like, yes, in public school, they're at school that long, but they are not learning during just no, like that's not
It's a whole mess.
Yeah, that's not how it's supposed to work, right? And so in that case, the kid probably doesn't need to deschool because they're not coming in with those expectations, but the parent definitely needs to do a lot of studying and learning about what this is supposed to look like and what appropriate expectations are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got homeschooling as the big umbrella, then we have philosophies under homeschooling, one of which is unschooling, and then deschooling is outside of that umbrella, and it's this process, this breathing time, this bad breakup periods. We're taking a break before we jump in. So I love your analogy, Amanda. So we want to talk about what it looks like on a day-to-day basis and stuff like that. But first, we want to take a moment to tell you about this week's incredible sponsor. So Miss Devon's Video Game Universe is an online community where kids can safely connect, play, and grow through their love of video games. Miss Devon herself is a total badass, if I do say so myself. She was featured on the national stage. She was on the Kelly Clarkson show. How cool is that? And as Amanda and I, being two women who are kind of doing our thing, we are all about celebrating the success of other women. So go, Devon. Their program is dedicated to providing a welcoming space where young gamers can bond over their favorite games without the fear of interacting with strangers on the internet. Dun, dun, dun. Nobody wants that, right? Their online video game social clubs give kids a place to share their passion for gaming in a safe and structured environment. Each meeting is led by one of their amazing video game teachers, who themselves are all lifelong, passionate gamers. But their sessions are more than just playtime. They are opportunities for students to build confidence, develop friendships, and showcase their gaming knowledge in a setting that values and celebrates their interests.
Yeah, so Miss Devon's Video Game Universe offers engaging clubs and classes featuring popular titles like Minecraft, Fortnite, Pokemon, Mario, and Zelda, ensuring that every gamer can find a place where they belong. Their mission goes beyond gaming, too. They offer unique fantasy themed ELA curriculum that's really tailored towards upper elementary age students. These classes are perfect for kids who love gaming, right? If they already love writing as well, they'll be in heaven. But if they're not super enthusiastic writers, these classes are, a comfortable segue because they lean into an interest. And we all know the key to successful homeschooling is finding ways to use your kiddos' interest in their education.
Yeah, 100%. So these classes are great. They're unlike anything else that's out there and what other people are doing. Miss Devon's Video Game Universe does an incredible job of blending the excitement of gaming with education. They foster creativity. There's critical thinking involved and really a love for storytelling. At Miss Devon's Video Game Universe, they believe that gaming is more than just entertainment. It's a powerful tool for building connections, boosting confidence, and inspiring young minds.
Yep. So you can check out our show notes for a link to the class offerings at Miss Devon's Video Game Universe. She has actually been on our show as well, talking about how to effectively use gaming in homeschooling. So we'll link that as well to give you some additional insight into her and what she's all about. Because, yeah, she really is awesome.
Yes. So I'll add on a personal note that my boys have taken classes with Miss Devon and her team for years. During the pandemic, they were in this Thursday night Pokemon Unite club, and the whole house would crack up, right? It was Thursday nights at 7 p.m. And it was just such a stark display of how different my kids are because you'd never know my oldest was in the class. He'd be in his room, he'd be taking class. We never heard a peep out of him. My youngest, who plays Pokemon like it's blood sport, the entire house would hear him. I mean, you'd hear him in his room and he's enthusiastically yelling like, go left, I'm on top. It was hilarious. I mean, I'd be on the far end of the house sitting there with my mom and we would just be cracking up listening to how much fun he was having. They formed awesome bonds with other kids in class and they looked forward to it every week. I mean, they loved that class. And I knew that they were in a safe and supportive environment, which was huge for me. So definitely check out our show notes. Find the link, pick a class. Your kiddos can join together with other gamers to play and learn and thrive. And we've got a coupon code for you as well, which is Devon Coupon 19. And that'll make your first class only $1. Devon's name is spelled DEVYN Coupon 19. And we'll put that in the show notes to make sure you can just copy and paste it and make life easy. So thank you for your sponsorship, Miss Devon. And we are looking forward to feedback from our listeners about their kiddos and loving class and all that good stuff.
All right. So, yeah, that's awesome. But let's get back to this whole deschooling thing. Okay. So now that we've defined everything and we've given a big shout out to our sponsor for the week, how long should you deschool? So I'm sure we both have a little bit of a different take, right? And again, this comes back to our difference in both in how we homeschool, but also in how we got here. I know that there's this general rule of thumb that it should be like 1 month of deschooling for each year that your kiddo was in a traditional school, almost like dating relationship advice again, right? But it's not that straightforward, I don't think, right? It's been my experience Not my personal experience, but it has been my experience in helping lead the group and with friends and things like that. But sometimes, yeah, a month per year is totally fine. And sometimes you need so much longer than that to get to this point where like your kiddo is actually excited to start learning again. You had an experience like that, right, Megan? One of your kiddos really needed a lot longer.
Yeah, he did. I mean, I pulled him at the end of the school year. So I'll start by saying summer break and Christmas break do not count as deschooling periods, right? It's not, I mean, you can kind of start the clock during summer break because you're officially free. But I think for my kiddo, especially who had, I don't want to say that it was a traumatic school experience in the sense like he wasn't bullied. He had amazing teachers. He was a good student, right? So I know there are people who have far more difficult experiences with school. For him, school was just an environment where he could not thrive. It was just, he felt so stifled there and a fish out of water. He felt like an alien, there. And it was not good. It was like a crucible for him. And so, when you see your kid every day, you don't really notice it as much. Like, obviously, you can see that things are not amazing, but when I look back now at Facebook memories that pop up or something from that time period, I mean, he was just a shell of a human. He had no facial expression. He was barely speaking by the time he pulled him out. He had just kind of given up. He kind of retreated inside of himself. And he was only 8. He wasn't even in that environment for that long. So imagine if you pull a kid who's been enduring bullying or challenges with being othered due to special learning needs or differences. Oh, how much is inside of them that we don't even see. So yeah, I mean, we started deschooling, but I think mentally for the kids too, they were used to at that point having summer break. So for him, I think it took not going back in the fall for him to really truly understand, like, I am free. I do not have to go back there. And it took throughout that entire first year for me to slowly see little inklings of my kid eking back out, right? Where he would start laughing and he would joke around and he had interest in things again and stuff like that. It took a long time. And again, his experience wasn't nearly as bad as plenty of the others that I hear out there. He had a teacher who just mothered him like crazy. She was so wonderful. She was so sweet to him. She knew he was suffering. She knew he was miserable and she tried so hard to help him. So yeah, I mean, we needed a lot longer than that. So
Yeah. And the other thing too is I kind of mentioned earlier that sometimes it's about the kiddo needing to deschool and sometimes it's about the parent needing to deschool. And in our situation, I didn't feel like my kiddo really needed to deschool at all. We didn't do any preschool or anything like that. He did go to a Montessori school for kindergarten that he was very active in the process of picking, and he absolutely loved it. He completely loved that environment and that place for kindergarten. Then the pandemic happened and he got sent home mid kindergarten year. And, I mean, you can't really do a Montessori classroom at home. I invested in some things, but I'm not Montessori trained. It wasn't really working. And so we ended up switching then to like a part-time virtual public school program, but we were doing homeschool stuff on top of it because the virtual thing wasn't really working. He wasn't really learning much, and I didn't want him just falling behind, and he was bored and he just needed more, and it was fine. But at that point, it was really on me. We stayed with that program for 2 years. Um, and I just wasn't ready to let go of someone else providing the structure and someone else doing that. And it took a lot of looking at what was going on and thinking about what were we fighting about? What were the stress points that we were having most of our issues around? And it was this little piece, the 2 hours a day that he was spending with the virtual program online is where our stress was, and everything else that we were doing on our own that we had picked to do as our own home stuff was totally fine and we had no issues there. And so, I fought that a lot longer, and I read the books, and I read the websites, and I joined the groups, learning all of these things, preparing myself, figuring out how I was going to be able to let go of this idea that like I'm not sure that I can do this. I think maybe I need someone else to. So I was definitely deschooling myself way more than my kiddo was. He was
Mhm.
so happy when I was like, look, we're gonna stop that program and you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to get online and listen to the kids make tons of noise, and you don't have to do Envision Math and Wonders ELA anymore. And he's like, oh, that was me having to deschool.
Well, it was funny because I was thinking about that earlier and I was trying not to get too sidetracked. But when we brought up about in some states, public school online not being legally considered homeschooling and all of that. And I so badly wanted to say, if you're picking public school online, please come, like book a coaching session with us. We won't specifically try to talk you out of it if it's truly the best thing for your family. But I think more often than not, it's comfort zone. And for so many people, it's like fear of failure and comfort zone. And if you are leaving the public school system because something isn't working, the odds are really great that that something is just going to follow you home when you choose the public school online version. I mean, it's probably not ideal, and it's so rigid and it's so time consuming and all of that kind of stuff. Like you can do it, you can fully branch out and do your thing. And if you need some support doing that, book a coaching session. We will work with you, or come to our Patreon Q&A, or just reach out, phone a friend, because the online public school option is typically not amazing. And a lot of times we see them like 3 months later, somebody's like, well, I picked the Discovery K-12 or whatever it was because of this, that, and the other thing. Like, it's not going great. And I'm reading the post. I'm like, this is shocking information, right? And we don't see 20 of these a month. Just make sure that if you're choosing it and it's not sort of letting go of what you know and what's comfortable, because the other side of that is amazing once you can get there.
Yeah, no, that's me. There are some very specific cases where that is the best option for one reason or another, and we totally acknowledge that. But yeah, if it's just fear holding you back, come let us support you. Us, the two of us specifically, our Facebook group more generally. Yeah, we've
Yeah,
got you.
absolutely. Yeah. So deschooling can last a really long time. I mean, it can go on for as long as you think that your child needs. But at a minimum, I would think that 1 month per year in school is kind of the minimum guideline. And it's going to feel like a long freaking time when you're doing it. We can tell you that much right now. Don't panic. It's okay. It's going to feel long. Okay. So we're in this phase. What do you think a typical day might look like in this phase? I'm curious from your, because we homeschool so differently, Amanda. What do you think a typical day of day schooling might look like for someone?
Well, because we are far more academic focused, for me, it would be, and I tell, so you're getting basically a free coaching session or a mini session here right now, right? Because I feel like, there are so many ways. Really, the goal of deschooling is to give your kiddo a chance to process what went wrong in their traditional schooling environment and to find that love of learning again, to reignite that spark of like, oh, I actually want to like learn stuff and know stuff. And for me, that looks like just a continuous drip of interesting information to see what gets them excited again. And that can be interesting documentaries. It can be trips to the library and picking up all kinds of different books. It can be random classes and events around town. It can be field trips to things that are educational and also things that you wouldn't necessarily think are educational. Maybe you do a field trip to the indoor skydiving place. Hello, physics in motion, but it's fun and so it's this goal of like reigniting the fun between you and your kid and getting this basis of like we can enjoy doing this together. We can be in partnership together on this. And there are other things. Math is one of the big ones that people are always like, well, how are we going to get math in? And I always say like bake, bake and cook. And it sounds kind of random, but one of the things that I would absolutely do is find a recipe that's too big and say, hey, can you make this for dinner tonight? But we only need half. Or find a baking recipe that's like, hey, let's do something nice for the community. Or maybe we're going to put some care packages together for people. Or let's take some cookies to grandma. How about you make this, but let's double it? Or let's do it 1.5 times. So now they're working with fractions, they're doing all kinds of addition and subtraction and things like that. Like that's totally math. It's math in action. And you have something tasty to do, and they're gonna realize that you're like practicing these things and you're keeping up with them without it being like this traditional, okay, now what did we do for math? What did we do for science? What did we do for ELA?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, what would a typical day look like for you as an unschooler in this deschooling phase?
So, ironically, in my world, they're not a huge difference, I don't think. But I think to your point where you said kind of this steady drip of information, for me, I think I would classify that in my brain as a steady drip of exposure. So, because unschooling is all about interest led. And a lot of times we see people who are like, my kid has no interests, none whatsoever. And I think there's a few things about that. Number one, in the school system, having an interest beyond what was on the agenda for the day wasn't really welcome. If you started asking questions that were on, a related track to what you were talking about, that was still off track. It didn't matter how related it was or how that connection was made in your brain. You were now taking the group off track. This is not welcome. Stay focused. Stay with what we're doing. The end.
Stay focused. Yeah.
Right. So the longer your kid was in school, the longer they were trained to not really make connections outside of the thing that was right in front of their face, because that was not welcome. So that takes time to break down. So that's one thing. Another thing to be super careful about is if you're in this phase, I can almost guarantee you the second your child shows interest in something, you're going to be like, we should write an essay about it or something awful like that, right? Do not, right? First of all, you're still deschooling. Second of all, there's no greater way to kill something that your kid is interested in by making it really awful work. So chill out. Okay. Just let them be interested. Just let them have interest and let them go deep. It's amazing. So I think there's a few things there. The other thing is, too, when you say, oh, my kid doesn't have any interests, there was a post that I saw not that long ago where the person was like, my kids don't really have any interest, this, that, and the other thing. But in the post, they kind of laid out what a typical week looks like for them. They're home like all the time. Right. And so you can find interests at home, but I doubt this parent was looking for their kid to pick up like knitting or something. I highly doubt your kid is just going to be like, you know what I should take up when they're just like sitting at home on the sofa. Right. So a lot of times that is, like Amanda said, going to a museum or taking a class at the library. The library is a great source a lot of times for free introductions to things. Okay. They're not going to go super deep oftentimes, but it might be just an introduction to a topic that they might be interested in. Museums are great too, and they often have classes that are not terribly expensive. So, I mean, I used to pay like $8, stuff like that when my kids would take a museum class. So the more you expose your kids to, the more likely you are to find an interest or multiple interests. And so I think that kind of that's the big thing, but doing it in such a way that it is so light and so casual and so fun. There's not a lot of pressure. It's not work. It's not a mandatory. And you're probably going to be panicked the entire time inside, just be like, they're not doing anything. This is not working, but it's okay. Just keep offering up stuff. Hey, I'm going to watch this documentary. You want to sit with me and, color or whatever? And let's put this on. It looks pretty interesting. I'm pretty interested to see what this is all about. Let's go check it out. Just super low key and super relaxed.
And if you have a kiddo who really wants to avoid anything that might seem educational, and you know that you can't say, hey, I'm going to watch this documentary. You want to join me? Make a big bowl of popcorn, throw some M&Ms in it, sit down in front of the TV and see if they don't come sit next to you to have some of your popcorn. There are ways around it that it doesn't have to be this fight. And this is the time that you can really, like I said, so much of it is about building a foundation of like, hey, we're going to be partners. They were not partners with their teacher in school. There's no school that does a great job of being in partnership with the kids that they're teaching. They have too many kids. They can't. But you can be in partnership with your kiddo and helping them learn what they're interested in, learning things they had no idea they were interested in. I'm not a history nerd. My husband couldn't care less. We have spent our lives going to museums and like, sure, we'll pay to go to the Louvre and we can walk through that bad boy in an hour and a half, in and out. Like, we are good. Thank you very much. That is not our kiddo. And I'm not really sure how it happened, but we spend hours sitting on benches taking turns walking around with him because he just loves it. Like you'll be able to find what works and you can be in partnership with your kiddo if you're just open to seeing what they enjoy and giving them that time and space to do it.
I love that. I'm laughing because we went to two museums in the last week and we are not fine art people either. But it was funny because when we went to the Louvre a number of years ago, I think we felt this pressure to like respect the Louvre and be fine art people. And so we met up with some friends who are world schoolers who happened to be in London. And one day we went to the National Gallery and then another day we went to Tate Britain. And we went to the Tate specifically because there was one painting my daughter really wanted to see. And so we were like, great, you're going, we'll meet up with you, this and that, right? And this time we didn't put pressure on ourselves to be like fine art people because you have to see, I mean, there's people that bring their own stools with them and like carry them around these folding stools so that they can just like sit there. And you hear them being like, oh, the emotion and the light. Do you see how the light is coming in from this side and casting the shit? And I'm like, dude, I'm getting none of what you're putting down here. And then, and then there's people sketching because they feel so inspired. And that's all amazing. I'm so happy for all of those people, but we are not those people. So this time we came up with our own stories for the paintings that were not what was written on the plaque, right? So it would be like, there was this one and it was supposedly people trying to escape the great flood and they were like praying to God about save me from the great flood and this and that. I thought it looked like they were doing Tai Chi. So like, but we just started coming up with our own storylines, which was a creative writing endeavor in and of itself. So we just had the best time ever. And then my daughter is planning to go to art school. And it was so funny because there was this one thing there that I mean, I'm sure whoever did it, I'm sure they must be a talented artist. I mean, their stuff's in Tate Britain, but seriously, it was like a suitcase with like human hair trailing out of it. It was so creepy looking. And I literally said to her, I go, if I pay for you to go to art school and you start jabbing human hair into suitcases, I'm going to ask for my money back. I'm just letting you know right now. But you don't know. What's your point? You don't know unless you try. You got to go to all these different kinds of museums. Now, a history museum, we'd be there all day long. Okay. We'd be there all day long. We'd read all the plaques. We would talk to the docents. We would watch the film. Like we would do all that stuff, but we're just not fine art people. But you don't discover that until you go and you try it and you do your thing. So,
yeah, you have to try really hard to make sure that what you feel about it isn't what your kiddo feels about it. It takes a lot of effort to remember to be like, oh, are you interested in that? Do you want to read the plaques? There's another plaque over there. There's another room with a movie. Is that something that you want to go do? And not just be like, oh, you don't want to do that, do you? Because if you say you don't want to do that, do you? Of course, then the kid feels like, oh, no, I guess not. Like, you really have to check yourself as the parent who's like, oh my God, no, 4 hours here. I can't watch another movie. You can't make me watch another movie. Like, put a good book on your phone. It'll be okay.
Exactly. Or start making up your own storylines for what's happening and whatever it is you're looking at. Don't read the plaques and do that instead. It's good time. We had fun. We had a great time. All right. So here you are. You're taking months, hopefully months and months to deprogram your brain, detox your public school experience, retrain your brain about what education is, all of that kind of stuff. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Before we get to that, we're talking about what a typical day looks like for kids, right? What you're doing with your kids. But I would like to add to that. I feel like you should be doing some work on your own, right? Reading the books, listening to the podcasts, engaging with other parents. We host twice a month. We host a Q&A. We host a social. Come, show up to those things. You don't know what you don't know. And so just throwing yourself into that environment is so, so important that the work is being done on your end as well. Pick up any homeschooling book you can think of. Some of them are way better than others, but you'll start to figure that out as you go along. So it's all good. So a typical day, if the kid's off, playing a game, playing basketball, rollerblading with friends, whatever, put a good audiobook on while you're folding laundry that's homeschooling. Listen to our 75-ish episodes that came before this one. It's all there. So that's part of that deschooling process for you, not just for the kiddo. So
yeah,
I forgot to mention that. Sorry.
Okay, absolutely.
So we're taking months and months and we're doing all this stuff, right? You're doing your work. They're being exposed to things. They're letting go of what their bad experience might have been or what they think an education is. You're exploring, you're finding new interests, you're having fun together, you're bonding as a family. Is this even legal to do? I mean, shouldn't you be schooling? You have registered as a homeschooler. Shouldn't you be schooling is kind of a concern that a bunch of people have. So the answer is yes, you're fine. Legally, you're fine. Because the reality is deschooling in my mind looks a lot like unschooling, right? So some people go from deschooling and then kind of transition into unschooling and it just becomes their permanent way of being. Other people deschool and then rock serious academics like Amanda does, right? But either way, let's imagine that deschooling and unschooling are similar. Unschooling is legal in all 50 states, 100% legal. So if you're in New York, if you're in Pennsylvania, if you're in Missouri, if you're in these places where you're like, yep, that's me, it is 100% legal to unschool. Oftentimes, what will need to happen during this phase, and it depends on how much you're recording just for yourself in those states versus how much you're submitting to someone else to look at. But it's a matter of taking the things that you are doing and converting them into a language that people who have a very linear view of education will understand. So if you are baking together, if you are going to museums together, if you are doing pioneer days, if you're at the Renaissance Festival, you're watching documentaries, you're at IMAX, you're at the Science Center, whatever it is that you're doing, your kid has learned to knit, whatever the case is, it's taking that and turning it into science, history, math, all of those things. Your kiddo doesn't even have to know you're doing that. Okay. And it stinks that you have to do it because in my mind, it messes with your deschooling a little bit as well. But if your legal requirement is to do that, then you will do that. If you need help figuring out how to do that, let us know. But yeah, it's completely legal to be able to take this time off and do your thing.
Well, yeah. And I mean, again, it's that thing, deschooling. The point of deschooling is stepping back and not doing school the way that you think school is supposed to be done. But it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no education or learning happening. Like, we're not saying deschool. And if that means that your kid wants to spend 87 hours a week on the couch playing video games without anyone else and without a class, without any discussion, and, like they're going to eat, breathe, and, you know, all like we're not saying that. We're not advocating that. And I don't think that anyone necessarily would say, like, your kiddo should become completely obsessed with video games, and that can be deschooling, right? Like, these are not the same thing. There's plenty to do. There are plenty of ways that they can get quite a lot out of video games, as we've been talking about. But there are also other things that you can and should be doing: getting out, going to places, trying new things. Even just going on a walk in the city can be considered an urban hike, and that can count for biology, it can count for PE, it can count for all of these kinds of things, right? And again, that's about you changing how you think about things and how you quantify your education. And also, worst case scenario, anytime you try to think, like, well, they're really not learning anything. What were they learning when they were miserable in public school? If they were going to school and not taking any notes and not paying any attention and failing their tests, they weren't getting much out of public school either, but it still counted because they were showing up every day, So, like, it's cut yourself some slack.
Yeah, that's so true, right? And if you live in a state where that's not required, like I've homeschooled in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, no one's requiring that level of detail from me. Don't create extra work for yourself. Don't be like, I feel like I should be documenting this in case somebody randomly knocks on my door and asks me for it. No one's going to do that. So do what is required of you by the state, and that's it. The end.
I will say I like to document a little bit more. I enjoy documenting. That's my happy place. So maybe don't document too much during the deschooling process. But if you want to spend that time as part of your deschooling process, figuring out how you're going to track things moving forward in this whole new world, that can be one of the things that you study and look at. Are you going to create a spreadsheet? Are you going to use an organizer? There's so many options out there. People talk about them all the time. And that's okay. And again, this is one of those things. You do need to do deschooling, But what that looks like and what the next step looks like, it can vary quite a lot. And it's all valid. Almost all of it's valid. There are a few things we'd really say, please don't do.
I was about to say before when you were like, I don't think anybody's advocating to let their kids play video games 24/7. I have been in some unschooling groups because in radical unschooling, that is a-okay. There's no redirection whatsoever in a lot of these, in some groups. So it's funny, right? Because we talked about the spectrum of homeschooling and Amanda and I being on opposite ends of the spectrum. But even within the unschooling world, there's a huge spectrum. And so I'm probably at one end of the spectrum. And then there are people who are like 90 hours a week of video games is totally fine by me. And I'm not judging that person. That's how they're doing things. And I don't live in their house. Those aren't my kids. So rock on. But there are people who do say, for me, that would not work. It would just,
Well, that's more what I was thinking. Between the two of us,
right.
neither one of us would say like that's an ideal situation at any
Yeah.
point in your homeschooling journey.
Yeah. It wouldn't be my choice.
Yeah, exactly. And just like even for me as an academic aggressive homeschooler, there are people I see who are also other academic aggressive homeschoolers that I'm like, I don't know if that's how I would. Okay. So, the spectrum.
For sure.
All right. So, how do you exit the deschooling phase and like, okay, now we're ready to homeschool? How do you know when it's time?
That's such a good question.
Right? I mean, it's totally going to vary based on your kiddo, the situation that you're in. In my house, again, it was more about me being ready to let go and me being ready to say, let's try this new thing. And when I was done collecting the data, which is how I operate, right? Collect all of the data, analyze it, put my spreadsheets together, make my decision, and then take the step. Not everyone is like that, right? In your house, Megan, it was, especially with your one kiddo, right? When you really kind of got your kiddo back and he was back to being the kiddo that you missed and you recognized him again. Sometimes, especially if it's not such an obvious on either end of the spectrum, if it's somewhere in the middle, it might be one of those things where you do set an arbitrary, okay, my kiddo was in school for 4 years, so we're going to do it for 4 months. And we're going to try at the end of 4 months, we're going to introduce one thing with one in my family, right? We would maybe start with one curriculum, something that I know they like. So if we were specifically doing it right now, I know my kiddo's really into history. I would probably start with either a solid history curriculum or an organized out school class that's on World War II history or battles or something like that. And we would just start there. And for maybe the first month, we're going to keep doing some kind of deschooling stuff with one curriculum there and do that for a month. And then after that goes well, at the second month, we're going to introduce a second curriculum and just kind of build on this. And we're not going to go from like, okay, the end of deschooling is over. Here's your stack of books. You've got 4 hours a day of schoolwork. Let's go. Like, no one wants that. You don't
That's
live
a really crappy transition.
That's awful.
But if you're in that deschooling phase, one of the signs that your kiddo might be ready for more is they might start asking for stuff based upon an interest, right? So your kiddo might be like, oh, okay. So let's say you've listened to this episode today and your kiddo is just in some awesome Minecraft with Miss Devon's video game universe. And then your kiddo starts realizing they're into history because you went to a museum or you watched a documentary or something. And they're like, do you know, I looked on OutSchool and they have this really cool class about World War II battles. It looks pretty interesting. Do you want to see it? In no way, shape, or form would I, as the loosiest, goosiest unschooler, be like, no, we're deschooling. You can't do that right now. When we are done deschooling, you may take a structured class. If your kiddo is asking for information, number one, always say yes. Number two, that might be one of your signs that they're ready to start coming out the other side of it as well and just easing on in. So they may give you some signs as well. But yeah, sometimes there's this thought process when it comes to unschooling that we withhold formal classes from our kids because it goes against our philosophy. And maybe there are some unschoolers who do that. I can't speak to every unschooler in the world and how they do things, but I would never, I don't care how the information, if they're interested, yeah, the answer is yes. Go, learn it, do the thing, have fun. I'll pay for it. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And truly, if you need some support and you need to talk it through, like Amanda said, come to our Facebook group, sign up for a coaching session, come to a Q&A session in Patreon. You are not having to do this alone because it's unnerving.
Yeah, no, that's it exactly. And we're about to tell you about our Facebook group, and I think it's a great community and you should totally come join it if you're doing that. But things are complicated right now. And if you're like, look, I'm not on any meta platform things right now. Facebook is not for me. We get that, but we're also on Patreon. We are available. You don't have to come to us just through Meta. Now, that said, we do want to invite you to join our Facebook group. If you are on Facebook, we are building this awesome community of people. Hopefully, we're going to get some people added here soon. So, yeah, listen, it's a secular, progressive safe haven that is, I like to call it like this just really awesome little corner of the internet that we're creating. You can connect, ask questions, make virtual friends. Some of the other secular groups have really shown their stripes these last few weeks, this kind of post-election time frame with this, like, we can all just get along BS messaging stuff. We don't agree that marginalized communities should need to agree to disagree with people who disagree about their very existence. We're not doing that nonsense. So come find us. If we sound like your people, come find us. You search Homeschool Moms Unfiltered in like the general search, and then filter from there for groups. There are questions that you have to answer. You'll know it's us because the tagline says secular and progressive AF. If you don't know what AF stands for, it means as fuck. Okay, so it's secular and progressive. Answer the questions. Please be patient with us admitting you to the group. We vet every single profile, every single individual who tries to join the group. We're going to look at the groups we have in common. We're going to look at the other groups you belong to that are public. We're going to go into your actual profile. If your profile is super locked down, we may go look and see if your husband or your partner or something like that, if their profile's open. Like, we're going to make sure that to the best of our ability, we keep this space safe. And then we message with a lot of people as well. Like, hey, we couldn't tell from your profile if you're a good fit. Let's have a conversation and see if it feels like it. But all of that takes a lot of time. Sometimes you catch us at a good time and it only takes a few minutes to be admitted to the group. And sometimes it takes up to a few days. Like, I started out today saying I did not feel well yesterday. I didn't approve hardly any yesterday. Then this morning I was up in the middle of the night because I couldn't sleep. And so I approved some because it puts me to sleep. And I had it down to 100. And by the time I woke up like 4 hours later, it was back up to 140. And then I was approving people off and on throughout the day because I was chatting with them and, verifying. And as I'm approving individual people who I've been talking to, the number is ticking up and it's up. And as we sat down to start, it was like over 230 or something. I mean, like,
It was like 250. Yeah.
Yeah, we try. We're doing our best. Please, but we are humans. So we would appreciate your patience.
We're doing our best. And then sometimes one of us goes to London for a week and starts going vintage shopping and seeing clothes and not really holding up their half as well as they could be.
No, but
But look, it's there.
it's true. But also, this is the reality, right? This is homeschooling. This is life. We all have so many irons in the fire. We're juggling all of the things.
Very good. Well, we hope you took something away from our conversation today about deschooling. Whatever questions you have, we are available for support. We end each of our episodes with a mantra to spur you on and get your day going. So today's mantra is, deschooling might feel like standing still, but it's actually clearing the path for a smoother, more successful journey ahead. Trust the process. Sometimes stepping back is the best way to move forward. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.